remind you that the festival remains free, and it does depend very heavily on donations from the community and from individuals. So if you are so inclined, I would like to encourage you to make a donation to the festival, either on the plaza, Venmo you can use, and also online. And we really do appreciate those. And please don't forget, no donation is too small. I'm also going to ask you, if you would please take just a moment to silence your cell phones. And immediately following our session here, the authors will be on the plaza until around 4 o'clock signing books. If you need a copy of the books, Parnassus has a sales tent adjacent the signing tent where you can get a copy of the book. And some of the proceeds from there will go to the festival, so we appreciate your purchasing your books there. A native of Mobile, Alabama, Lauren Denton comes to us from Homewood, Alabama, where she currently resides with her family. She is a USA Today best-selling author and has also received wide accolades from the Wall Street Journal, Publishers Weekly, and Amazon charts. In addition to her fiction, Lauren writes a monthly newspaper column about life, faith, and family. With 5 previous novels, her most recent, and the one she is going to talk about today, is A Place to Land. And it really is a page turner, I can assure you of that. That's one you don't want to miss. Susanna Lewis, a Tennessee resident, is a humorist, novelist, and freelance writer with articles appearing in Parents Magazine and Reader's Digest, among others. In addition, she is an award-winning blogger, having won the Blogger Voices of the Year award, and is also a podcaster. She has 2 Christian nonfiction books, which are USA Today bestsellers. Today, she is here to read from and talk about her new novel, Bless Your Heart, Ray Sutton. Please join me in welcoming both Lauren Denton and Susanna Lewis.
Can y'all hear us? I don't know if you can. We got to pick it up. Well, because this would look stupid the whole time, wouldn't it? No, I don't want to do that at all. Okay, Miss Faye, you're not going to ask us questions, so we're just going to Well, sure. Whatever you want.
Okay. Hello. I'm glad y'all are here. So the very first thing the first idea that came to me for this book was in 2020, the fall of 2020. We had a big hurricane that came through the Gulf Coast. It was Sally. It was in about September, and I live in Birmingham, and all we got in Birmingham were those kind of the feeder bands that came through and made everything real windy and swirly. And I remember walking my dog, and the wind was blowing around, and I had this thought of an older woman having something that was buried, literally buried under the sand, be uncovered during this hurricane, like the hurricane blowing the sand off and uncovering something. And if you've read this book, there's no hurricane. That doesn't actually happen in here. So that the hurricane part went away, but I kept having this idea of something being uncovered that had been previously hidden. So through all the drafting and outlining, what came out was a story of a woman who has a secret that she thought was buried. Well, 2 sisters actually, it became 2 women, 2 sisters, who have a secret that they thought they left buried 40 years ago in the past. And then one night it becomes, it's revealed to them and to the people in this town that their past isn't as hidden as they thought. So I guess really it was secrets that I wanted to write a book that was a little more mysterious than my previous stories had been. What about you, Susanna?
That's great. this book came to me after my mom passed away in 2015. My Aunt Eula invited me to come and talk about a book I had self-published, a fiction book I had self-published at her little ministry with some other ladies. They met once a month. And so while I was there listening to these ladies talk, one of which was my English teacher in the 6th grade, I was just listening to their banter and them going back and forth and talking about who was in the hospital and who needed praying for and who just had a baby and getting everybody's names mixed up. No, that's not her grandson. That's his grandson. You know, couldn't remember names, then getting in arguments about it. And I thought, what a great story this is about these ladies. And so I originally called it The Third Thursday. And it was about this group of ladies that meet on the third Thursday of every month in their ministry of sorts. But one of the things that really resonated with me that day was my mom had only been dead for about a month and a half. And how they really encouraged me that day and lifted me up and reminded me of my mama. And so that's what the book is about. It's about Ray Sutton, whose mother's passed away, and she's going through a divorce. And her Aunt Maxine, her deceased mom's sister, invites her to their little ministry club, and how these older ladies pour into her and their humor and their wisdom. I learned I used too many commas all the time. I think I did. I think there's sections in the book where Ray restores furniture and moves into her mother's old house and restores furniture, and she finds these letters that her mom left for her behind. And I think, I don't know about learning per se is maybe closure for me in some ways regarding my mama's passing, of things that I thought she would say to me or things I wish she would say to me. So this book was therapeutic for me to write, for sure.
I think I learned about birds. There's a bird watcher in here, so I learned a lot about the birds that we see at the beach. And I think I don't know if learning is really the right word, and I don't know if closure would be it for me either. But it's sort of I always learn after I finish writing a book kind of what I was trying to say. I don't really know what I'm trying to say until I get done writing the book, and then in hindsight I can go back and kind of see how things fit together. But there's a lot in here about what someone's willing to do to protect people that they love, and in this case it's with two sisters. And I don't have a sister, but I have two daughters, and I always am thinking, this is the second book I've written. I didn't realize that for a while. This is the second book I've written that has two sisters. So I think I'm just kind of trying to imagine what my daughters are going to be like one day. And just there's the idea of protecting the people you love, and then there's another thread of learning how to kind of step into who you are without having disappointments or regrets or hurts from the past kind of hold you down. I think both of these characters had to deal with those two things. So they learned them, and I probably learned a little bit through them.
Were there any surprises along the way as you were writing?
Always. I think for me, always. I don't know about Lauren, but I can plot out what I want to happen, and it rarely goes that way. Yes, there were surprises. I've probably tried to block them out at this point after all the rewrites of what this was originally supposed to be. But yeah, I think there's always surprises, and my book's characters kind of take on a different way than I kind of mature and grow in a way that I didn't really see until then. And I think that's rewarding to go back and read, what you originally had in your head, and then to see what it turns into. Yeah, how they grow.
I have that's my exact same answer, but you made me think. I've heard authors say they hear their characters speaking to them and telling. Do you feel that way, or do you feel like you're
I did
in
feel that
control
way.
of
Yeah,
them?
it's a little creepy sometimes. I do feel that way. Yes, I will find myself in conversations with my husband or with my friends thinking about what characters would say or do in that scenario, which can get weird sometimes. But I think that's, as authors, I think that's great that we become so absorbed by them and kind of take on their personality sometimes, because we spend so much time with these people. They become real to us. So,
think when you create, you're creating a character. So if you're learning, if you can imagine what that character would say, in a certain situation, that means you're getting to know them well.
That's right.
So that's good. That's a good thing.
It is.
Yeah.
Which characters did you feel like changed the most from the beginning to the end of the novel?
Well, maybe the mother, because she was alive in the beginning and then she died.
That's true.
That was a pretty big change, yeah. The Ray, the main character Ray, because she starts off very timid and confused and in despair, and of course my faith comes through in the book of how she relies on the Lord to get through the things, and also the older ladies who pour into her. So yeah, she changes from being just very kind of lost and confused, I think, into understanding and finding her way back.
I think my main character is the one that changed the most. I think she starts off, she just thinks she has everything all packed away and tucked away and covered and tied up, and then this secret comes out as a boat that's been under the water for 40 years comes to the surface, and it brings all these secrets back up, and that just sort of disturbs her perfectly orchestrated world, and so she has to deal with, it's like the can of worms, everything's going everywhere, and she's got to try to stuff everything back in, but then realizing maybe that's not the best thing. Maybe letting everything out is the best thing, and I probably learned the most from her, and she changed the most.
I would agree with that.
Yeah.
If you were to write a spin-off, which character would be your main character?
Oh, that's not where I thought you were going with. That's a great question. I know who so this book, the main characters are the two sisters, but the points of view, there are chapters from several people, and some of them just have one or two chapters, but there's a young girl in the book, the third female voice in the book. Maya is 18, and I would love to follow her and see what happens in her life. She kind of finds her way to these sisters in this art shop that they have, and she decides that this is the place where she belongs, and that she's kind of bounced around from home to home, and yeah, I would love to see what happens with her. Sometimes I think about that particular character just because she was so young and she had her whole life, has her whole life ahead of her.
Right, and
Yeah.
she's had such an interesting, mysterious past.
That's right. So to see where she lands would be neat. Yeah.
Your book sounds wonderful, by the way.
Well, thanks.
Oh, geez, I don't know. Maybe Aunt Maxine. I think Aunt Maxine should have her own book. She's a very opinionated Southern lady, and I think
Has a lot of wisdom.
she
to give
does
out.
have a lot of wisdom, and she has a lot of opinions, and I think we could fill a book with her opinions quite easily.
Was that like your Aunt Eula? Is that
It
how
was.
she
It was kind of a combination. It's funny. It was kind of a combination between my Aunt Eula and my grandmother. Both of them kind of I kind of combined them, I guess. But all the older ladies are inspired by ladies that I did grow up around. My grandmother's friends, my aunt's friends. So, yeah, I think that would be. Maybe she seems like the type to solve a murder or something, like Jessica Fletcher or something. Maybe we could do that. Y'all call me. Yeah.
Let's talk. So I was going to ask you if you had if you ever write yourself or into your characters, but it sounds like there's a lot of you in this story in your family.
Yes, there is. I think you write what you know.
Yeah.
Right. I know after my dad died, I very rarely wrote a book with a father alive. Now that my mother's passed away, I haven't really written anything about a character with a mother. So I think you write what you know. I had self-published my first book years ago before my mama passed away, and it was about a girl that was kidnapped and called 10 Years Taken. And I self-published that on CreateSpace. And people would stop me in my little hometown all the time, and they'd be like, "Is this book about your life?" And I was like, "No, my husband did not kidnap me," because she ended up marrying her kidnapper. It's crazy, but anyway, I was like, "No, we met, in a restaurant. It was okay. He didn't force me against my will to, go on a date with him or anything." But I think, yeah, you kind of come out in your books. Do you think that? Do you come out? You think in the characters?
I think there are pieces of me in all the characters. I don't think I haven't put myself on the page in any one particular character, but I think there's personality quirks of me in each of my characters. But my family sure thought they were in all of especially my mom thought. I had a couple of rough moms at the beginning, and my mom, who is just sweetest, most wonderful person, kept saying, "Is there anything you need to talk to me about?" I'd have to say, "I'm not writing you into this story. Yeah. I was just totally fictional."
Yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I have written some things that are completely different from who I am, because I think it's fun, too, to explore what life is like for a completely different, character or lifestyle and that kind of thing. But, yeah, sometimes I see myself coming out and have to reel that back in sometimes.
Or somebody else will read the book and say, "Oh,
yes.
I see, this is you."
Yeah.
Or this is... my husband thinks the two sisters are very much like my mom and her sister, and I didn't see that at all.
Yeah.
And now I think, maybe that was
is.
way buried down deep, and I just didn't know.
Subconsciously,
Yeah.
there they came. Yeah.
What part of the book was the most difficult to write?
The middle. I always say the middle of everything is the hardest, because at the beginning of no matter what it is, I am fired up with a new idea, and it's so fun and so exciting. And I know where I'm going at the end. I've already kind of mapped out what the last, if not the exact end scene, kind of an idea of what it is. But that middle is like, I think it was, I read this book by Dani Shapiro every time I start a new book. It's called Still Writing. You should, okay. I always want to make sure everybody knows about that. It's so good. She said when you're in the middle of a book, it's like, it's not just being in a boat in the middle of the lake. It's when you're building your boat while you're in the water, trying not to sink. That's what it feels like in the middle. That's the hardest for sure.
It is accurate. The middle's always I'm exactly like you. I'm gung-ho about it at the beginning and so excited, and then it's like, what have I gotten myself into? What are we going to fill the next 220 pages with? As for, I think I would say that too. As far as content, a lot of the stuff about my mom, but as far as just kind of trudging through the middle, when you could just, and then you go back and you read it 75 times and you think, this book is terrible. That's what you think, because you've read it so much and it's so predictable. You don't think of it as people are reading your books that have no idea what's going to happen. You think of it as, oh, this is so predictable. But, yeah, the middle's always hard.
Okay, when you're coming up with a story idea, do you start with a character, or do you start with whatever you want your conflict to be, or a setting? What starts stories for you?
Settings usually inspire the book. Like on a road trip, if I see a produce stand, there's my setting right there. The book opens with a produce stand. Who's at the produce stand? A girl's at the produce stand. What happens at the produce stand? This happens at it's usually, for me, very visual about settings. Weather. Weather's very inspirational to me. Rain, the nip in the air, how the trees look, what the grass is, that kind of thing. So, yeah, I think the setting first, and then I put people in it.
Yeah, that's the same thing I do.
Do you?
I feel like I don't know. I don't hear most people say they start
Like you
with
said, you were
settings.
walking your dog.
Yeah,
And there was
and it was the wind.
Yeah.
It was the weather.
Yeah.
But I do all of the books so far. I knew where I wanted to set them, and
Yeah.
then I kind of built the story and the people around that.
Me too.
Yeah,
For sure.
That's really neat.
Yeah.
I had a place. I knew specific places before I started writing. I knew I wanted to set a book in Mobile and New Orleans. I wanted to set a book on a farm. Yeah.
Do you often pull up Google Maps and
Yes.
look for the right, geography and
Yeah.
this and that? I spend so much time on
Yeah.
trying to research where the setting
Yeah.
is,
Do you have fictional towns, or are you putting it in a real place on the map?
I usually do fictional towns
Okay.
inspired by real towns.
Yeah.
So this town in this book takes place, the setting is in Whitten, Alabama, which is, in my mind,
I see a little town right outside of mine, just a little speck on the map, a little Tennessee town, Greenfield, Tennessee. That's what I see in this book. But I wanted it to be in Alabama, but I kind of know the geography. I was like, well, it's northern Alabama, so let me get out the map and see what all northern Alabama's got going on and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's so neat. That's the exact same thing I do.
Isn't that fun?
I base it on a real place. And I usually will name other real towns that
I do
actually
too.
are
Yeah.
around there, so people will kind of have an idea. But I've learned that if I put the main action in a real town, I'll get something wrong.
Absolutely.
And then somebody will say that road goes east and west, not north and south, and you should have.
And they will
you should
say
have
that.
a better
They'll say it.
proofreader to fix that. Yeah, so they're all fictional, but I have a Google Map tab all the time open, so I can figure out where the water is and where the roads go. And I love our process is so similar.
Writing is fun.
Okay, so tell me about do you have any more questions? I'm sorry. Okay. You have kids. I know you have one young one. What is your writing schedule process like? How do you make that happen?
It's a lot of authors I know get up early in the morning and write before everybody gets up. I don't do that. I can't get up early in the morning. I can't get going in the morning. I wish I could. I envy that. I envy authors who get up and have coffee and have quiet time and do this. And I did that for a little while, and I'd have quiet time and read my Bible and do all this, and I felt great. But then I just missed sleeping, so I quit doing that. For me, even in high school when I wrote, it was late at night when everybody's gone to bed, and it's still the same way for me as an adult. I'm content. When I know that my kids are content in their bed, everybody's taken care of, everything's done for the day, I can sit in my office or in the living room with the lights low and write. That's what I do, which means for a lot of very late nights, a lot of nights I stay up until the sun comes up, which is, when you get in that zone and don't realize that you've been writing for 4.5 hours. That happens, and then I'm unbearable the next day. So usually when my family knows that I'm about to start working on another book, they all come together and pray and get prepared for it, because they're going to have to eat Lunchables for supper, and I'm going to be up late, and I'm going to be cranky. But they're good sports, I guess. What about you? Do you write morning? Are you a morning person?
Exact opposite of you.
Yeah.
I feel like after 1 or so in the afternoon, my brain just nosedives. So I used to, but when my kids were a lot younger, I had a period of time where I wrote from 5 to 7 in the morning, which was really hard because I really liked my sleep too, but my kids' nap times had changed, and that meant nobody was sleeping at the same time, so I had no time to write. And my husband got up and ran every morning before work, which I thought was awful, but he said, you've got this time when nobody needs you, why don't you try that? So I really wrote most of one book and some of another book in those hours. And it was kind of like everybody's tucked away in bed, nobody needs me, everything's dark. But now I don't do that anymore because the kids are in school. So I'm still working in the morning, but it's after they go to school. Yeah. I try to be done by noon, though, because that's when my brain power just kind of goes down. But I sit with a cup of coffee. I like to sit on the couch. I think the coffee, even if I write in the afternoon for some reason, I've got to have a cup of coffee. That kind of triggers something in my brain. Yeah. Well, I guess if it's at night, you need the coffee to keep you awake.
Yeah, it's real smart to drink coffee at midnight and then try to function the next day. Yeah. I would love to be a morning writer. I would love to. I followed, I don't know if you've ever heard of My Morning Pages, and it was, I can't remember. I hadn't had any sleep. It was a routine where you get up and you write first thing in the morning, and that's what you do, and then you just brainstorm, and that's when you are supposed to be the sharpest and the clear-headed, and I used to do that as well.
Is that the Artist Way, her morning pages?
It is.
Pages.
That's right.
She talks about morning pages.
Yes.
Just getting everything out for 3 pages every day.
Yes, that's exactly right.
Yeah.
And I don't do that much. I don't do that anymore either. Maybe I should.
I think it changes as your life changes and where you are. Your writing has to kind of fluctuate with it.
It does. And the older I get, the easier it is for me to get up in the morning. I remember my mama when she got older, waking up at 5 in the morning, thinking, "Why can't I go back to sleep? Why am I waking up so early? This is what old people do." And well, there's nothing against that, but maybe as I get older, that's what I do, because I do find myself getting up earlier and earlier and being more alert in the mornings than I used to, and I do find myself sleepier and sleepier earlier when I used to, could go to 1 or 2 in the morning. I'm pretty much done by 12:30 at this point. I'm ready to put it up and go to sleep.
Did any of you have questions? We'd love to answer any questions that people may have. You can just wave at us if you do, and we'll call on you. Okay, I have one more question for you while y'all are thinking. Are there any books that either books that you read that inspired you to write, or, I don't know, authors who you like to write that kind of help you?
Oh my gosh, Lauren, that list is long. That is a long list. I know when I was 8 years old, I read a book, which I've told this story a million times. When I was 8 years old, I read a book called The Trouble with Tuck about a dog. And on the cover was a picture of a girl and her dog, and I love dogs. And, that was before the time that I realized that if a dog is the main character, it's going to die. That's before I realized that. So I took the book home from the elementary library and read it and was so excited about this girl and this dog. And it made me laugh, their friendship. And then the dog got sick and died, of course. And I remember being 8 years old, I've told the story many times, laying on my bedroom floor and sobbing my eyes out. And I thought, how powerful is this, that this book made me go from laughing to 5 pages later crying my eyes out. This is what I want to do. I want to write stories. I want to make people feel something. And so I wrote my first book at the age of 8, and it was about 2 friends named Laura and Sarah, and Sarah moved away, and Laura was all devastated and cried, and I took it to my mama and prayed she would cry when she read it, and she teared up a little bit, and I thought, well, there I go, I've done it. And I wrote 4-star reviews on the back, not 5, because I was humble. And so reading, even at that young age, 3rd grade, is what inspired me. But since then, oh my gosh, I love I love Steinbeck and old things like that, and Hemingway. I grew up on that and have copies of all that, and C.S. Lewis, all kinds of I love older things. And then I just, read whatever's popular a lot of times. And then I read The Hunger Games by Suzanne Collins and fell in love with that. And so I self-published a dystopian novel. I don't know where that came from. So I think, don't you think that when you write, you read things that kind of, it's definitely an inspiration. And you read these things, Stephen King says, and, or many authors say that in order to be a writer, you have to be a reader. You have to read. And so I just read any and everything I can, whether it's good or bad. I just try to read something. If it's bad, I think I can do better than that. If it's good, it pushes me to be as good as that. What about you? Who are your favorite authors?
I read a little like you. I read a bit of everything. I read a lot of, it kind of depends on where I am with my writing. If I'm in the middle of writing my own book, I can't read books in my own genre. I can't read Southern.
That's true. I agree with that.
Some women's fiction, but especially like women's fiction set in the South, I have to kind of hold off and read that when I'm not actually writing. And I love historical fiction. I'll read young adult. I love young adult.
I love young
Dystopian
adult.
is like a guilty pleasure.
Yeah.
So maybe I'll read your book.
Please.
But yeah, I think the book that, I always say the book that made me want to write was not anything like what I write, really. It's The Secret Life of Bees by Sue Monk Kidd. That was the last book I read that made me think I want to start getting down some of these ideas that have been in my head for all these years, bouncing around. And kind of a similar thing with your little 8-year-old book. It made me feel so much, even though my life was nothing like, it was like a 12 or 13-year-old narrator in the 1960s in South Carolina with these African-American beekeeping sisters, like as far from my life as you can get. But I connected with that little girl so much. And I thought, what an honor to be able to write a book that somebody totally different from this world can connect with and feel so deeply. So yeah, after I read that a few times, I thought, I'm going to just give this a shot and see. Yeah. And I think you do have to be a reader before you can be a writer. I think you have to know, you have to know what makes a good story for you, what is satisfying to you, but then you have to be able to get your own voice. I think that's part of why I have to be careful what I'm reading. Not as much now as I did when I first started, but for a while I thought, I don't want to accidentally sound like somebody else, like another author. And I think now I know my own voice on the page, but I still just kind of have to keep that my genre separate from what I'm writing. Yeah.
I agree with that, for sure. I can't read something similar to what I'm
Yeah.
writing.
It just
That
feels a
means
little
there's too much going on up there. Yeah.
You can only shove so much stuff in the head at one time. Anybody have any questions that you want to ask?
What do each of you want your readers to take away from your stories?
I think encouragement, humor. I try to put humor in my books. I think laughter is wonderful medicine. Encouragement, lifting. Even when I'm not writing something that's meant to be faith-based, my faith and love of the Lord comes through in it, because that's who I am. And if I can give people a glimpse of hope through my faith, I think that's my main purpose, for sure. Hope. And also, just sometimes it's good to just get away from everyday life and just read a book, and just escape from everything. So I like to just be an escape for people. And going back to when I was 8 and reading that book and thinking, I want people to feel something, to laugh and to cry and conjure some kind of emotion. I just want to make people cry. That's what laugh.
That's all I want to do.
Yeah, I just want to make people cry. Just make people feel something and just escape for a minute.
Yeah, I'm very similar. I think I read as an escape. I read every night before I go to bed. It's how I kind of settle my brain and turn everything off. And I want to be able to give people that little escape and bit of just somebody else's world to kind of slip into for a while. And I think I try real hard not to make my books end with everything all tied up and perfect, because I think life is just real hard and can be really sad, but there's so much hope, like you said. There's so much encouragement, and I just try to write what people's real lives are like, and hope that people can get a little sense of redemption, whether it's through relationships or I don't know, somebody finding their way out of a difficult situation. So encouragement. I think the reason readers gravitate towards stories is because you can see a character walk through something on the page, and you think, I wonder what I would do. I wonder if that's how I would react if I was in that situation. So we read to kind of maybe shed light on what we might do, and I don't know, give people something to think about. I mean, whether it's a character walking through a death or through a new love or whatever, just give people a new way to look at life. The good parts and the bad parts.
Perseverance.
Or the hard parts.
Perseverance
Yeah.
a lot of the time. Yeah.
Yeah. As we're talking about your readers, can you describe what your ideal reader is?
Somebody that leaves a 5-star review on my book. Somebody who takes the time to go to Amazon and leave the 5-star review. That's who I want to read my books. That's it, honestly. No, I don't think, I don't know, Lauren. That's a hard question. It is a hard question. I don't know. I don't know who I kind of envision. I know that I have a fan base of from young to old, and so I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that I can resonate with so many people.
I think what I think about most is there's several book clubs right in my hometown of Homewood, Alabama. It's right outside of Birmingham, and there's a few book clubs I've met with after every book, and those are the ladies I see when I think, would Melanie Falconer like this book? Would these people that I know read every story? And I'm not writing for them. I mean, I guess I'm writing for them and for myself, but I have those ladies, and I get messages from men too sometimes that say, I know I'm not your target audience, but I really liked your story. So I don't want to alienate any men, because I know they read some too, but mostly it's women. So that's who I think of. I think of ladies sitting around book clubs and talking about books. And Yay, Leslie. Because most of them come to your book clubs, sit in your library, like Melanie. Yep. Oh, thanks. She's in our library in Homewood. Can tell Melanie I just dropped her name, and she'll love that. Are you really? Were you going to ask a question?
If they were to adapt your books to movies or a TV show, who would you have? Who would you like to play the main character?
Reese Witherspoon.
Just hit for the big dogs first, yeah.
Yeah, I'm go big or go home. Reese Witherspoon. I do think about that. I would love. I mean, I think about that. The characters who I would want to play if it was ever made into a movie. Yeah.
I haven't thought really of these. Usually at some point I've kind of done that with most of my books and thought, okay, who do I kind of see this character being like? And I have not done that yet with this book at all. I don't really have. I have their faces in my mind, but they're not anybody. They're not like celebrities or actors. None of them, which is really weird. I haven't done it yet. And I used to put it on Pinterest, like they call it like casting couch or whatever, like but then I would offend people because they would say, that is not at all who I saw, and now I can't stop seeing that person. Yeah. So I don't want to like tell somebody, I felt really strongly that one of the characters in my book, The Summer House, one of the men who I had in my head was Jeff Bridges, and so many people were like, no, it's so-and-so. So I'm careful with that now. I don't really tell people who to think of. But I haven't in my head picked actors yet. I wouldn't mind Reese being in here. She could pick any character she wanted.
Miss Faye, you have it?
Well, I was just thinking about who would make a good Aunt Maxine.
Oh, yeah. There's got to be some good Southern characters. Yeah. Thinking like Weezer, if she were still in that time. Yeah. She could do it.
I'm not just staring at you like that. I'm really thinking.
I know, and I was thinking, and I thought Kathy Lee Bates.
Yeah. I don't know. Well, when I write Aunt Maxine's book and it becomes a movie, we'll say we can.
We'll see.
Yeah, she could be your follow-up. That could be the spinoff.
Yeah, that'll be the spinoff. Yeah.
Any other questions from anyone else?
We're getting close.
No? Okay.
I usually I write it my first time through on the first draft, but then I feel like I know the characters better when I get to the end of the book. Mm-hmm. So on my next pass through, I kind of fix all the dialogue that doesn't sound the way they do now in my head. So whether it's the person's sarcastic or funny or whatever, I'll go back and tweak that. Excuse me, because I really want them to sound just like I want them to sound, and it takes a while to get that dialogue to sound right. So it takes a few passes to kind of make sure they're sounding the way I want them to sound.
I agree with that. I'll go back and read, and I'll think, she would never say that.
Yeah.
What
was I thinking?
That's way out of line for her. So I do the same thing. I write it, and as far as I want him to be funny, I don't really plan on that, I don't think. I think I just write what pops in my head, and if it's funny, good. If it's not, darn, But don't put a whole lot of thought into it. I just write, like Lauren said, write it out and then go back and revise it.
Once you figure out their personalities and how they would say things.
Yes.
Once you're having conversations with your husband and you think, oh, that's how
right.
Aunt Maxine would say that.
That's right. That's right. Yes, ma'am. Who is my first reader? After I write it. It used to be my mother, and now it's my friend Janet. My friend Janet is a huge book lover, and she's very well read. She reads constantly, and so,
Does she give feedback? Like, I think you need to change this?
Oh no,
or-
she would never. I wish she would.
Okay.
I wish
so
she
just
no.
read-
She just
yeah.
thinks it's the best thing she's ever read in her life and puts it on Facebook. That's why I give it to Janet.
Puts it on Facebook.
I think it's good to have an encouraging friend. Well, like you said,
Yeah.
your friends in your book club. I trust my friends with that for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sometimes my mother. Well, shoot, I should have said my mother-in-law. Is she in here? No, my mother-in-law thinks she gets the first copy, but it's Janet. Oh man, she's not
You
here.
just get yourself in
Yes. What about you? Who reads you?
They're sitting right there in the
Right there.
corner. Those are my two
get
readers,
the
and they
first
give
ones.
very good feedback.
Does your husband read your books?
He does, but so the first few he read early on,
Yeah.
but now he wants to read them when they're pretty done. So he didn't read this until it was in an arc once
Yeah.
it came out. And then my mom read it early. I usually give her, she wants a manuscript, like
Yeah.
a Word document, and she would read it on her iPad.
Yeah.
My dad doesn't read it. He wants like hardback. When my books started coming out in hardback, he
Yeah.
was like, "Thank you." He loves a hardback, so
Yeah.
he reads it when it's totally done.
Yeah.
But yeah, those two help me get it out of the sticky middle
Yeah.
and all those hard.
And they give
places.
you feedback.
yeah,
on it.
really good feedback. Yeah,
Y'all should.
and
Got the
if
ghostwriters.
you look really carefully, the names are really small on the bottom. And then there's one other author. It's the two of them, and Lindsay Brackett is another Southern author, and she reads too, and she gives good feedback.
Yeah.
Those are my three.
Well, I guess Kimberly reads mine first.
Well, yeah, she's both of our. both
Kimberly
our-
gives
our
good
editor
feedback.
Is here. She gives
Yeah.
great feedback.
Kimberly gives great feedback.
Yeah. It's good to have somebody who just asks a lot of questions, who makes you
Mhm.
think. I always think you make me
Mhm.
think so much deeper about the characters in a really good way.
Yes,
Yeah.
absolutely.
How are we on time? Are we running low? Are we good?
We have a couple, we have about 5 or 10 more minutes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. What are you working on now?
I have a novel about sisters, Della and Darby, coming out in February. Speaking of Kimberly on that one, that's a completely different book in finished form than it was from the beginning, but I can tell you it's much, 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 much better than it was in the beginning. So I'm thankful for a good editor and constructive criticism and encouragement in that. Thank you for that. But it's about two sisters, and they live with their grandmother, Birdie, who's an eccentric older lady. Eccentric older ladies, I love them. And they're fun to write about. And I think because I've grown up with eccentric older ladies and been surrounded by aunts and great aunts, and so it's about two sisters, Della and Darby, and their grandmother Birdie. And where do they live? Mississippi. I knew it was Southern. It's either Alabama, Mississippi, or Tennessee every time, so I get confused sometimes. It's all the same. So I'm excited about that when it comes out in February. And then as for what's next, we're kind of talking about that. I've got some ideas, but we'll see what happens with that. Yeah. You, Lauren?
I am just sort of getting my feet wet again,
Yeah.
and I took a little time off to breathe, and
As we all need to
as
sometimes.
we all need to do. Yeah, so I'm just kind of playing around with some ideas. But I have another question in these last few minutes. It's like not about this book at all, but I want to ask about your blogging world and then your writing world. And which did you start writing fiction first and then start the blogging, or vice versa?
I did.
'Cause I feel
So
like you have two parts to you.
yeah.
Yeah.
I did. Well, I started writing when knew from a young age I wanted to be an author. But as far as actually I should have shaved my knee. I told you that earlier. I didn't shave my knee. So I self-published in 2015, and in order to promote that, I started my blog. I had been writing, when blogging was big back then, and had a blog where I would kind of go and journal, and I had 3 people read it, my mom, my sister, and some prince from Nigeria that kept asking for my routing number, and those were the only 3 who read it, so nobody read it. And so I just continued to blog with that, and then I took the blog to Facebook to kind of advertise the book. So it started off, it's always been writing. It's never been my goal to be a blogger or make videos or do that kind of thing. That was just kind of came along with it. So it's always been the writing for me. Yeah.
I know you have a big following on your blog.
Yeah.
They love your books, I'm sure. I bet
Yeah,
they
they're
were
pretty good
proud of
people.
you.
They are. They're good
Yeah.
people. And it's funny to see, I've seen the same names, a lot of the same names pop up that have been following me for 6-7 years and have been loyal to buy everything I write and to come to stuff and purchase things and listen to the podcast, and just very loyal fan base, and just great encouragers too. And strangers, committing to pray for me and that kind of thing. It's a beautiful thing. The internet can be so dark and ugly, and there can be so much negativity on it, but it's also it can be good. It can be a blessing. Yeah. Miss Faye?
Well, I was just sitting here thinking this is way off base, but what was your favorite book as a child?
Oh, man. I would expect to say something like Charlotte's Web. Probably the Babysitter's Club series
oh my gosh,
by
I was gonna
Ann
say
Martin.
the exact same thing.
Yeah.
Babysitter's Club.
Babysitter's Club series. I still have all of them too. I still have all of them. They're in fire safe at the house, and so they're not really. But yeah, I love those books. And talking about reading to write, those books inspired a lot of my writing as a kid.
You know what? I'm sitting here thinking, it was girls, but it was
Yeah.
navigating friendships and relationships, and maybe we have that buried in there deep.
I think so.
Maybe that kind of helps because
Yeah.
we write about women and what they go through.
Yeah.
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 Yeah, I don't have one specific book, but that whole series, and then there was another series about this little orphan named Mandy. I just call them the Mandy Books. We had
Yeah.
I don't know, do you remember those? Yeah. Okay. Yeah, they were so good. I read all of them. She lived, I think it was in North Carolina somewhere, and some of them were ghost stories, and she had I don't even know why she was an orphan. I don't know what happened to her parents, but it was like mysteries.
Yeah.
And yeah, they were great. I read all of those.
Yeah.
So I guess I like series.
I do too. I like series.
I
Shows.
haven't written a series.
Yeah.
I don't know how that would be, but I like to write them. I mean, I like to read them.
I do
haven't
too.
written them.
I like a continuing
Yeah.
story.
Yeah.
And Goosebumps, R.L. Stein. I used to read a lot of Goosebumps.
Yeah.
I like scary stuff. I'd like to write a scary book one day.
Good. You've already written dystopian. You can make the jump to
Yeah.
ghost stories.
Yeah. I'd like that. Anybody? We
Last
out of time?
questions.
Any other questions? No.
Thank y'all for
Okay.
coming. and
Yes,
listening to us
absolutely. Thank
chat.
y'all so
This was fun.
much.
Thanks.
And we're going to make our way to the signing tent, and we
Wonderful.
hope to see you there.
Yes, please. Thank you, guys.